press conference room was packed. Hundreds of reporters, cameras, microphones, flash bulbs. The Beatles sat at a table, all four of them, looking tired, uncomfortable, like they didn't want to be there, like this was obligation instead of choice, performance instead of conversation. A reporter raised his hand. "John, there are rumors about the band, about tensions, about your future. Can you address them? Are the Beatles breaking up?" The room went silent, waiting. This was the question everyone wanted answered. The question that had been circulating for months, years. The tension was visible. The distance between the four men who'd once been inseparable. Everyone could see it. Everyone could feel it. But nobody had confirmed it. Nobody had said the words, made it official, made it real. John leaned forward, into the microphone, looked directly at the reporter, and said one word, just one. "Yes, that's all. Nothing else. No explanation, no elaboration, no softening, just yes. Confirmation. Truth. The thing everyone feared but nobody wanted to hear. The Beatles, the biggest band in the world, the most influential musicians of a generation, were breaking up. And John had just confirmed it, with one word, on live television, in front of hundreds of reporters. Who would tell millions? Who would tell the world? What happened in the next 30 seconds would change music history, would break hearts worldwide, would end an era, because that one word, that simple confirmation, that honest answer, changed everything. Not just for the Beatles, but for everyone who'd loved them, grown up with them, found meaning in their music, found hope in their message, found connection in their art. This is that story. April 10th, 1970, London, press conference, the Savoy Hotel, 11 a.m. The Beatles were supposed to be promoting their new album, Let It Be, their final album, though nobody knew it was final yet. Not officially, not confirmed, just rumored, whispered, speculated. The band had been falling apart for years. Everyone could see it. The solo projects, the separate lives, the public disagreements, the tension that had replaced the brotherhood, the business that had replaced the music. But this was supposed to be just another press conference. Standard, routine, questions about the album, about the songs, about the creative process, safe questions, predictable questions, the kind that didn't risk anything, didn't expose anything, didn't force truth into light. But the reporters knew, could sense. This might be their last chance, last opportunity to ask the real questions, the ones that mattered, the ones about the future, about whether the Beatles would continue, about whether the magic was dead, about whether the dream was over. The Beatles sat at the table. John, Paul, George, Ringo, not close, not touching, not laughing, just sitting. Four separate people who used to be one unit. Four individuals who used to be the Beatles. The body language said everything. The distance, the separate spaces, the way they didn't look at each other, didn't interact, just existed in the same room without really being together. A reporter stood, young, nervous, but determined. "John, there are rumors about the band, about tensions, about your future, about you and Paul not getting along, about creative differences, about business problems, about Yoko, about everything. Can you address them? Are the Beatles breaking up? Can you just tell us the truth? Please. Everyone wants to know. Everyone needs to know." The room held its breath. This was it. The question. The real question. The one everyone wanted answered but was too afraid to ask. Because asking made it real. Made it possible. Made it something that could be confirmed instead of just feared. John looked at Paul. Long look. Sad look. The look of someone who'd lost a brother, lost a partnership, lost something that could never be replaced. Paul looked back. Same sadness, same loss, same understanding that what they'd had was over. Had been over for a while. They'd just been pretending, performing, maintaining the illusion for fans who weren't ready to let go. For a world that needed the Beatles to stay together, to stay magical, to stay impossible. But the pretending was exhausting. The performance was crushing. The illusion was killing them. They couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't lie. Couldn't pretend they were still four friends making music when they were really four separate people barely tolerating each other. The truth had to come out, had to be said, had to be made real even though it would break hearts, even though it would end everything, even though it would hurt. John leaned forward, into the microphone. The room silent, cameras flashing, everyone waiting, holding breath, hoping he'd deny it, hoping he'd say no, hoping he'd laugh and call it ridiculous, hoping the Beatles would stay together, would stay the Beatles, would stay forever. He could feel Paul beside him, tense, waiting. They hadn't discussed this, hadn't planned what to say, but they both knew the truth, had known for months, maybe years. The question was whether to keep pretending, keep performing, keep maintaining the illusion that the Beatles were still the Beatles, still four friends making music, still the magic that had defined a generation, or whether to finally be honest. Finally admit what everyone could already see, that it was over, that the dream had ended, that holding on was hurting everyone. John thought about lying, about saying no, about buying more time, more performances, more pretending. It would be easier, safer, less painful. The fans would be happy. The press would be satisfied. The illusion would continue. But he was so tired, so exhausted from pretending, from being what everyone needed instead of being honest about what he was, which was done, finished, ready to move on. He looked at Yoko. Standing in the back of the room, she gave him a small nod. Support, understanding, permission to be honest, to be himself, to choose truth even when it hurt, even when it disappointed millions, even when it ended everything. Because that's what real love does. It supports honesty. It encourages truth. It doesn't ask you to pretend, to perform, to be something you're not just to make other people comfortable. Yes. One word. That's all he said. Just yes. Confirmation. Truth. The end of an era spoken in one syllable. The death of a dream delivered in one word. The Beatles were breaking up, and John had just told the world. No softening, no explanation, no apology, just truth. Raw, honest, final. The room exploded, not with noise, with silence. Shocked silence. The kind that comes when something impossible becomes real, when something feared becomes confirmed, when something you've been denying becomes undeniable. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, just processed, absorbed, understood that everything had just changed, that music had just changed, that their lives had just changed, because the Beatles were over. Then the questions started, all at once, shouting, demanding, desperate. Why? What happened? Can you fix it? Is this permanent? Will you ever reunite? What about the fans? What about the music? What about everything you built? Everything you meant? Everything you were? John didn't answer. Just sat there, looking tired, looking relieved, looking like someone who'd finally told the truth after years of lying, after years of pretending, after years of being what everyone needed instead of being honest about what he was, which was done, finished, ready to move on. Ready to be John instead of a Beatle, ready to create his own music, his own life, his own identity, without the band, without the pressure, without the expectations that had been crushing him for years. Paul put his head in his hands, not crying, just overwhelmed. This was real now, public, official, no taking it back, no pretending anymore. The Beatles were over, and the world knew, and there was nothing to do but move forward, but accept, but start building something new from the pieces of something that had been everything. George looked almost relieved. He'd been trying to leave for years, trying to establish his own identity, his own music, his own voice. But the band had held him back, had kept him in John and Paul's shadow, had made him the quiet Beatle instead of George Harrison artist. Now he was free, free to be himself, free to create without compromise, free to finally show the world who he was without the Beatles defining him. Ringo just looked sad. He loved being a Beatle, loved the brotherhood, loved the music, loved being part of something bigger than himself. But he understood, could see the tension, the pain, the way staying together was hurting everyone. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes caring means accepting the end. Sometimes the best thing you can do is release something you love so it can stop suffering, so everyone can heal, so new things can grow. The press conference ended, chaos, reporters rushing to phones, to typewriters, to cameras. This was the story, the biggest story in music. The Beatles had broken up, confirmed by John Lennon himself. One word. Yes, that's all it took. One word to end an era. One word to break millions of hearts. One word to change music history. The headlines the next day were massive. Every newspaper, every magazine, every broadcast. Beatles break up. John confirms it's over. The end of an era. Beatles no more. Not speculation, not rumor. Confirmed. Real. Final. Fans were devastated, crying in streets, gathering outside the hotel, outside Abbey Road, outside anywhere connected to the Beatles, holding signs. Please don't go. We need you. Come back. But the Beatles weren't coming back. Couldn't come back. The magic was gone. The brotherhood was broken. The dream was over. But something else happened too. Something unexpected. The solo careers began. John made incredible music, political music, honest music, music that said what he really felt without compromise, without having to please three other people, without having to be a Beatle, just being John. And it was powerful, raw, real, maybe more honest than anything the Beatles had made. Paul made beautiful music, melodic music, joyful music, music that showed his range, his talent, his ability to create without being in John's shadow, without having to compete, without having to prove anything, just making music because he loved it, because he needed it, because he was Paul McCartney, and that was enough. George made spiritual music, meaningful music, music that showed the depth he'd been hiding, the talent he'd been suppressing, the voice he'd been silencing to make room for John and Paul. And it was extraordinary, proof that he'd been underestimated, underutilized, undervalued, and now the world could hear what they'd been missing. Ringo made fun music, collaborative music, music that showed he was more than just the drummer, more than just the fourth Beatle. He was Ringo, an artist, a creator, someone worth listening to, someone who mattered. Not because of the Beatles, but because of himself. Years later, in an interview, John talked about that day, about saying yes, about ending the Beatles with one word, about the relief and the pain and the understanding that it was necessary, that holding on would have destroyed them, that letting go saved them. That one word, yes, that was the hardest thing I've ever said, but also the most honest. The Beatles were over, had been over for years. We were just pretending, for the fans, for the world, for the legacy. But pretending was killing us, making us hate each other, making us hate the music, making us hate what we'd built. So I said yes, confirmed the truth, ended the pretending. And it hurt. It broke hearts. It ended an era. But it also freed us. Let us grow. Let us become ourselves instead of just being Beatles. And that was necessary. That was right. That was what had to happen. Do you regret it? The interviewer asked. No. I regret that it had to end, that we couldn't stay together, that the magic died, but I don't regret being honest. Don't regret saying yes. Don't regret choosing truth over comfort, because that's what artists do. They tell truth, even when it hurts, even when it costs something, even when it ends things. Truth matters more than anything, more than legacy, more than money, more than making people happy. Truth is everything. April 10th, 1970. John Lennon said one word at a press conference, yes. And what happened next shocked the world, not just because the Beatles broke up, but because one word was enough, one honest answer, one moment of truth. That's all it took, to end an era, to break hearts, to change music history, but also to free four musicians, to let them grow, to let them become themselves instead of just being the Beatles. And maybe that's what had to happen. Maybe that's what love required, letting go, accepting the end, choosing truth over comfort, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. That's the lesson. That's the gift. That's what John taught everyone that day. Truth matters, honesty matters, even when it ends things, even when it disappoints people, even when it breaks hearts, because pretending is worse, lying is worse, maintaining an illusion is worse. Better to be honest and hurt than to lie and slowly die. Better to end something with truth than to let it rot in dishonesty. Better to say yes and face consequences than to say no and live a lie. John said yes, and the world changed, and it hurt, but it was real, and real is always better than fake. Always. Even when it costs everything, especially when it costs everything. That's everything.